so much for being here. Welcome to the Edge Talk Show.
Namaste.
Namaste. Oh, I'm so excited to see you. I'm sitting here in Seattle. Robin, you're in England right now. Where are you exactly?
No, Northern England, in Lincolnshire, out in the middle of the country amid many, many farming fields and forests and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, how beautiful. Oh, I'm so excited to connect with you today. So, Robin, I'm going to jump into your bio and properly introduce you here. You're a really awesome guy. Robin is a thought leader and game changer in adventure tourism, agriculture, sustainability, and how they work together. He's been paramount in enhancing, and promoting sustainability in countries such as Bhutan, Nepal, and India. He developed and launched Asia's first multinational sustainable adventure tourism project. He, along with friends, conceived the idea of developing the most challenging trek in the world that runs along the Himalaya from one end to the other and has become known as the Great Himalaya Trail. He is the author of the Great Himalaya Trail publications and maps of the Himalaya region. And I am just so excited to have the chance to spotlight you today and hear about your reflections going on during this in times of uncertainty, and just really dive into how you got here today.
Well, I guess it's a bit of I can't say it's a long story, and I'll cut it short. Look, I started out in life loving the outdoors, and being able to go off climbing or cycling or just exploring with friends or on my own was something that I enjoyed doing from a kid. I don't remember even when I first started enjoying it. So my family all have stories of me wandering off as a 2-year-old and a 3-year-old and causing mayhem in towns and cities as they can't find me. And after 6 hours or something like that, they'd find me wandering across the other side of the town talking to some stranger. And so it seems a natural habit, I guess, to go wandering off into different places. I mean, in reflection, if I look back upon myself as a student in university, I studied pure chemistry, organic chemistry as an undergraduate, and decided that instead of going into pharmaceuticals and petrochemicals, I actually wanted to go and work for Greenpeace International. And I was fortunate that the research lab for Greenpeace was in the same university. So I started volunteering and would persuade locals to dress up as dolphins and stand outside supermarkets on a Saturday morning. So I kind of figured that there was something different about the way I was thinking about chemistry and doing things compared to most of my faculty friends who were very much into petrochemicals and pharmaceuticals. And I was happy going out and exploring and adventuring on weekends rather than perhaps partying more than I should have and that sort of thing. I would quite happily go out and get lost. So when I finished being a student and I decided to go and have a look at the rest of the world, for me, Greenpeace was a suitable vehicle to be able to do that. And combined with just free wanderings and purposeful interactions with environmental groups, it was a good combination. I managed to, string it out for a few years before reality came along and told me that I had to settle down and get a job and all that kind of stuff. Which even then, I couldn't tolerate the idea of having a proper job. So I started working in the outdoor industry as it was in the early 90s in Australia, and taking groups up to the mountains as another excuse to be able to run away and explore things. So I guess on reflection, I've always had that desire to be outdoors and to be feeling that I'm free. That's always been there.
Where were you born?
I was born in the UK.
You were born in the UK.
I was here until I was 21. Then I headed off and travelled and settled in Australia. My father quite considerately explains that the IQ in both countries went up during my my travels because he doesn't have much of a high regard for people outside of the UK, and that included me.
So let's talk about the UK culture and your ideas about how you wanted to live life, because there was probably some contradictions there.
Yeah, and look, I'm back here now after 31 years of being away.
Yeah.
I was not the traveller that left home and then dutifully returned on a regular basis. It took me 7 years to come back to the UK for 5 days the first time. And then there have been periods of a decade or so where I haven't been here. So this period of 4 months now during COVID times is, wow, this is a big deal for me. And I feel such a stranger here. And it is a very odd, a stranger in your hometown, a stranger in your home, in your parental home. Yeah, it's poignant, and it's also a great opportunity to learn about yourself.
So you're back home now, exploring your roots, which is a great time to talk about like your background and your childhood. And so, what did your parents think about your, as you said, like, I tended to think differently.
Yeah, I'm by far the biggest disappointment on planet Earth, and I can't help feeling that my life is an eternal conundrum full of paradoxes and all sorts of concerning traits, I think, as my parents would probably say. I don't have a family. I've never been still long enough to own a property. I've no desire. I've just instinctively shied away from everything that people have previously described as responsible behavior. And yet I feel that I've been far more successful in doing what I want to do for the reasons why I want to do it than I ever could have been if I had stayed. So if I read something the other day that if a leader is to be defined by how many people you inspire, then that's a better form of success than just putting money in the bank. And I very much accord with that. I have to, because I've got no money in the bank. But I do feel that I've managed to be an inspiration, or at least some of the work that I've done has been an inspiration for others. And that to me is far more satisfying. And the feeling of being a citizen of the world is a much closer form of identity to what I feel than being associated with a particular borough or county or country or something like that. So yeah, I'm the biggest disappointment, and I'm proud to be so.
How did you have the confidence to steer yourself into this and say, hey, I know you don't understand this, but it's going to be okay? Did your parents like kind of always respect that you were this like out of the box thinker, or were they like kind of like, okay, we just kind of always hope that he's going to come around, and then then they're kind of they're happy now that you didn't come around? Or were they, what was the
I think the jury's still out on some of that, but there you go.
Okay.
A lot of it I didn't tell them before I was going to do it. A lot of it was something that just, oh, by the way, yeah, I just did this and I just did that.
That's so funny. That's what I've been doing to my parents my entire life. Unfortunately, it's worked out, but that's funny.
Of course it's going to work out. Of course it's going to work out. You're standing and the Great Himalaya Trail was not something I set out to do. I actually set out to do something a little bit different. Because even I, at the end of the day, didn't believe it was possible. We collectively, me and some friends, guides, people who have been in the Himalaya for as was then a very long time, and now almost an eon, we would sit around and talk about this idea of walking across the top of the mountains, linking all of the different Himalays together. And up until then, we'd been able to walk around them. You'd been able to go into them and come out of them. You'd never dream of trying to walk from, well, this mountain range directly into that mountain range and then everyone thereafter. So it was only after a few beers that even the idea started to make sense. And I then said, well, actually, yeah, perhaps it's worth having a look at, because I was just bored with going to the same places again and again. I get bored quite easily. I only need to go to a place a few times before I need to start sort of scratching my head and asking, well, where else can I go? So I had this idea of researching new areas. So that Nepal and China demilitarized their mutual border in 2002. And that really meant that for the first time ever, there were 9 areas where tourists, Westerners, foreigners, whatever, could visit for just to hang out. You could have potentially got permission from the king to go there in the past. Some anthropologists have been to a couple of these places a long time ago, but essentially they were out of bounds, especially for trekkers and mountaineers and that sort of thing. So I decided to go up and have a look at them. And in doing so, started to put together little pieces of a bigger puzzle that I really didn't understand. But like all jigsaw puzzles, you find a bit here, and then, oh, wow, you find another bit over there, and then all of a sudden, you've got 3 or 4 bits, and then you want to find another 3 or 4 bits, and it just sucks you in, and it just takes over. You've got to find another bit. You've got to be able to join it up somehow. And that got to a point where I thought maybe I've got enough bits of the jigsaw puzzle here to really have a go at trying to put it all together. Now, there's a mountain in West Tibet called Kailash, which is the center of the spiritual world for Hindus and Buddhists and Jains. And they say that you do not choose to go to Kailash. Kailash will let you come. So I thought, okay, what I'll do is come up with a very elaborate plan, because it's me, to approach Kailash in the most humble way possible. And that would be to start at another mountain beginning with K, called Kanchenjunga, in the far east of Nepal, walk across Nepal and into West Tibet and pay my respects to Kailash. So off I went to Kanchenjunga and started walking across this idea of joining all the different Himals together. And it was very, very hard, and it took me a very long time. But we actually did get there. We actually did get to the end of it. And my translator stood next to me on the last pass, and he said, "Die," which is big brother in Nepali. "Die, if you make me cross another pass, I'm going to die." I said, "It's okay. All we got to do is go downhill, cross the bridge. Over there's Kailash. We can go there." And we walked down the hill. We got to the bridge, and the Chinese government people standing there said, "Sorry, it's closed. You can't come." And I'd spent by then 8 years researching and trekking, and then doing the Great Himalaya Trail over 162 days of walking. And to get to that point and be told that I couldn't finish the very, very last bit was a very bittersweet moment. It was one of those things where it's a bit like life. You turn around and all of your dreams and your expectations suddenly can't be fulfilled because of somebody else. But then you turn around and look back on the journey that got you to where you were, and you realize actually that was the lesson, that was the learning. Getting to the destination, that's not what it's about. It's the getting to go through the process. That's what it's all about. So then the Great Himalaya Trail suddenly became a much bigger thing. Nepal is only 1/3 of the Himalayas, so then I decided, well, if I can't go to Kailash, I'll just walk the other 2/3 of the Himalaya. And then it became the Great Himalaya Trail. It was 3 years of trekking in the mountains. When you are in remote mountain communities, you realize that the way they live has actually been established over generations and generations of experimentation. And they have found a very precarious, fragile balance with nature and the environment that they choose to call home. And I quite quickly realized that these guys are very smart. You know, people talk about places like Nepal as being a poor country, and you know, people living in England or in Australia or wherever else will sit there and immediately have preconceptions about the sort of people that live in a poor country, and that maybe they're not very clever and they don't have a good education and all that kind of stuff. But actually their way of life is incredibly clever and resourceful and resilient. And they've managed to work out a fairly symbiotic relationship with the landscape and with the weather and with the animals, the flora, the fauna that surrounds them. And it's not really valued. It's not really appreciated. It's not something that the rest of the world is sitting there saying, wow, you know, you guys have got it worked out. What can we learn from you? We're all sitting in air-conditioned offices and driving around nice cars and sending our kids to school so that somebody else can teach them character and behavior because we're too busy on our mobile phones and everything else. So I find it as a deep irony in the way that the developed world thinks about the developing world, or whatever labels you want to attach to these different areas. And I actually think that there is a lot more to learn from these poor, impoverished, vulnerable, but very resilient and resourceful and knowledgeable communities, because it's not all black and white. It's not all straightforward.
I love what you're saying about the simplicity of a culture that we normally establish as like an underdeveloped, that the education is lower. We assume that we know better because our country is more developed, and that's so wrong. And that, like, now that you're bringing this to my attention, that I can completely agree with, because it does seem that like the villages that have the less are the most like fulfilled, and so there is some magic to that. I haven't had the pleasure of visiting Nepal and experiencing this culture firsthand. Can you tell me more about the norms and how the Himalaya has transformed you, and how, like, what experiences in particular that have spoke to your soul?
Oh dear. Oh, that's a long one. Well, the first thing I need to say is read the book, because I put a lot of the more socially acceptable stories in the book, because it's about perspectives, and not just my perspective, but the perspectives of locals. So I do take the time to try and find out what has happened to people. Why are they there? What do they call themselves? How do they think about themselves? Why is this community, or how is this community, or when is this community different from another one? All of that. And I'm very much pulled into it every single time. And then there are times when you're sitting on your own in the middle of nowhere and strange stuff happens. And a lot of strange stuff has happened. I don't begin to even try to understand it. It just is. And you accept it, and sometimes you dust yourself off, or you give yourself a little shake and say, okay, let it go, just move on. And that's part of life. It's part of the mystery of existence. We really don't know so much. And
What do you mean?
I'm kind of trying to think of a story that I can get away with quickly.
What do you mean by
so I was in
strange?
Bhutan. In the middle of Bhutan, I was the first person to walk across the Bhutan. And I'm sitting in the middle of the mountains, up in the middle of nowhere, and there's me and in Bhutan, they don't porter. They don't carry equipment. They use pack animals. So you got to have some horses or whatever, and their handler, a translator, because obviously my Bhutanese is non-existent. And I had a cook because, like in Nepal, these guys run on their stomachs, and you got to feed them. You got to make sure they're fueled. You got to be fueled. Otherwise, you're not going to be walking across anything. So we're sitting there, and we've arrived in a little campsite. The snow started coming down. It's at the point where we're meant to be changing horses for yaks, and we get there. There's no yaks. So, okay, what do we do? It started snowing. There's no more porterage to be animal to be able to take us forward. We're going to have to send the horses back because the snow's coming down pretty fearsome. And if we don't get the horses moving, then they're going to have trouble getting down safely. Okay, sit in the tent. Well, we're going to make it a choice. Send the horses. We're going to sit here and we'll see what happens. Are you okay with that, guys? And the guys are like, yeah, okay, yeah, so it makes sense. Okay, so we sit there. 24 hours later, we're still sitting there. The snow's still coming down. The horses have gone. Okay, guys, we're going to continue sitting here because now we've really got no choice. We can't go anywhere. You okay with that? Yep, no problem. Third morning. Okay, guys, it's still snowing. We're still sitting here. The horses have been gone for 2 days. How many rations have we got left? How much stores have we got? Okay, we could probably get away with 1 meal a day, and that will get us through for the next sort of 4 days if we ate 1 meal a day. You happy with that? Yep. Sure you're happy with that? Yep. Okay. So we're going to stay here for another day. Next morning, snow's still coming down. Okay, we're now 72 plus hours, stationary, unable to go anywhere. We've got more than 1 meter of snow outside the tent. There is no hope of being able to find any trails. Even going back the way we come is beginning to look seriously dodgy. So I get my satellite phone and I ring the office in Thimphu and say, guys, I think we've got a bit of a developing situation here. I'm not quite sure. Can you tell me something about any yaks that were meant to be here 3 days ago? And they said, oh, no, we can't find yaks. No, all of the yaks have gone away. You're going to have to get a helicopter when the snow stops and you've got to come home. So you don't seem to understand the way I work. Helicopters aren't part of the plan here, and I won't be coming home. And if we have to walk, break trail ourselves to try and find the way out of it, then that's what I'll do. They said, well, you're not allowed to do that. We're telling you, we're instructing you, you have to get a helicopter and come home. I said, well, you can only send a helicopter once the snow's started. So if I move while it's still snowing, you're not going to be able to find me. So I wouldn't send a helicopter if I were you. You're just going to have to live with this. So I hung up the phone. The other 2 guys sitting in just the vestibule of my tent, the 2 local guys, looked at me, slightly concerned expressions on their faces. And I said, look, this is my choice. You don't have to come with me. You don't have to put yourselves through this, but I'm happy to carry whatever I have to do and get on with it. Just let the snow calm down a little bit, let the weather clear up, we're off, or I'm off. Do you want to join me? And they said, yeah, okay, if you're prepared to do it, you seem to know what you're talking about, we trust you, we'll come with you. Okay, good. So we're then calm and resigned to our fate. And out of the blizzard, which is outside the tent, walks this local guy wearing full local dress, no outdoor fancy gear or anything like that, just local dress. He walks up to the tent and he can only see the 2 local guys sitting in the vestibule of the tent. And he said, is there a foreigner here? And the local guy said, yeah, there's this white-haired fellow in the tent. And he looked inside and he said, I had a dream about you last night. Well, not last night, 2 nights ago. I said, oh, really? He said, yeah, I've been walking for the last 2 days trying to find you. And I said, why would you do that? He said, I think you need some help. Do you need any help? And I said, yeah, have you got any yaks? He said, yeah, I've got 12 yaks. I said, well, where are they? And he said, they're a day away. I said, do you think we could use them? He said, yeah, no problem. I'm going to go and get my yaks and I'll be back here this time tomorrow, okay? And I said, okay. He turned around, he walked back into the blizzard and disappeared. And me and the 2 guys who were sitting in the vestibule of the tent looked at each other and we said, did that just happen? Were we dreaming that?
Oh my God.
What do you think happened? And we had a little conversation and we decided that we'd just forget it. And we would wait and see tomorrow morning whether the sky will be clear and we'd be packing the bags or whatever would happen. And the following morning, same time, this guy turned up with 12 yaks, and we packed the yaks and we carried on and we crossed Bhutan. Now, that sort of stuff happens a lot when you spend a lot of time out in the Himalaya, and you can't explain it.
That's an amazing story. I love everything about that story. So you're like, okay, and you just start accepting this as normal. Really?
Yeah. What is normal?
What is normal, especially during these times? That's exactly the questions that we should be asking. What is normal?
And people talk about the new normal. I never knew what the old one was. Oh, now I'm going to get really confused.
So let's talk about these uncertain times and what your thoughts are and revelations. Because I would love to hear your wisdom and insight as a man who discovered the Himalayan Trail, the Great Himalayan Trail, and has spent so much time in a place where normal is subjective. And now coming back and seeing the globe have to reevaluate everything that's going on and really actively engage in the present moment and take it one day at a time, which is basically what you do every time you go on an adventure. Is you're taking it one day at a time, and you're really ignited in the environment that's around you. So what has been your experience?
Look, to me, this is all a little bit like the exercise of the GHT. I had no maps. There were no guidebooks. No local guides, really. No one could tell you where to go, how to get there. And I think that's exactly where we are now. I hear a lot of not knowingness. I hear a lot of insecurity. I hear a lot of people talking about what they would like the new normal to be and what they would like the world to resemble once it's coming back together again. But they don't have that sort of sense of where they are right now, this point of reference of where they are right now, because the referencing systems don't work. So if you have a GPS, you rely on satellites to tell you exactly where you are. Well, we don't have a satellite and GPS system of life. What we have is just being able to try and work out as best we can how we are going with our navigation in whatever direction we choose to be going in. Okay, so where do we choose to go? Where do we want our destination to be? And that, to me, is a very interesting question that I try to have with people in the travel sector these days, because I think that there is this natural inclination for people to think that things are limited in some way, that their capacity is limited, or that perhaps the industry or their competitors are going to limit them in some way. And actually, that's not true. It's just like everything else in life. You can take advantage of an opportunity as you choose, and you can do with it as you choose. So I don't think that there are any limitations other than those that we construct for ourselves. And I think that's true for everything in life. And I fear for the travel industry that it could not achieve what people would hope it would, because of that sense of inherent fear of their own capacity to do so. So I've decided that I'm going to try and do something with the Great Himalaya Trail that I thought would potentially not be possible. And that is to turn the entire concept of what an adventure travel experience is on its head, turn it upside down. And instead of thinking of this linear relationship between customers and companies and suppliers and communities or whatever, to actually recognize that we're all basically in the same pot, the soup pot, swimming around trying to do the best we can. And that the communities, the hosts, are the key drivers of what it is we are trying to do. Not the business people, not the tourists, not the governments. It actually comes down to the hosts. Just like my home or my father's home When somebody comes into it, they are accepted into our world, and they eat our food and they hear our stories. That's exactly what is the relationship in tourism. It's hosts and guests trying to do the best that they can to be able to create mutual value. So I'm slowly going through making a plan to it's not mine to give, but in some way provide ownership, genuine ownership, to all of the communities along the Great Himalaya Trail of their trail, and to acknowledge that their hosting, that their hospitality is the fundamental driver to making it work or not work as a tourism experience. And I don't have to point my finger at the government and say, well, they didn't do their job. I don't have to point my finger at businesses to say, well, look, they weren't sustainable or anything else. I don't even have to point my finger at me as a customer to say that I wasn't informed or knowledgeable enough to be able to do it right. I'm going to try as best I can to give the hosts the capacity to be able to entertain guests and provide hospitality.
So then what has been your biggest reflection and takeaway from this experience and seeing, navigating this route and seeing, you mentioned that you've been more thankful for COVID than frustrated.
Yeah, I wasn't to start off with. I thought that COVID was terrible. I mean, I remember in the beginning of January or the middle of January reading a forecast that potentially COVID could infect 65 million people. Thank God we're not there. And thinking that, wow, this is going to really wipe out a lot of stuff if it gets traction. It did get traction. It didn't get as much traction as perhaps we feared it would. So I went through the same process of not knowing this and having to work out, rebalance, I guess, my risk profile to doing what I wanted to do and to start reassessing the choices that I was making about work and travel and places to go and all that kind of stuff, with this new criteria called COVID. And then coming to the UK and spending time with parents was a little intimidating to start off with. I don't have many friends who in later life have had a free, out of the blue opportunity to just spend quality time with their families. And that's exactly the way this has worked out for me. So again, I then reflected and started to feel blessed for this opportunity and to start thinking, well, really without COVID, I wouldn't be here. This is the longest period I've been in the UK, for 31 years. I would be up a mountain somewhere or running around the planet doing something and completely off grid. So to be here and to have this time and to be doing things with people at their stage of life that you think, I'm probably not going to get this opportunity again. I'm probably not going to get these days, this level of mobility, this level of coherence, this level of togetherness. This isn't going to repeat itself. So I should be really thankful for that. And I know it sounds strange and perhaps very out of place, but yeah, I do say thank you, COVID, now.
So what has been your, so you're in the state of pause, which is very different from your typical life of moving and going. And so what have been the personal edges that you have been leaning into, and how have you managed that? And how have you been sustaining your vibrancy?
Well, the very first one is not moving. Wow. That grated and was difficult for 3 months. The prospect of not moving. Not that I wasn't moving. I still walk and exercise and go out and do all this different stuff every day. But just the knowing that there wasn't an airplane I could go and get on tomorrow, that there wasn't an opportunity to just be on another continent in 24 hours. that sense of restriction and confinement was, wow, I've never had that. I've always been blessed, I guess, because of nationality and opportunity, to be able to choose to be wherever I wanted to be, whenever I wanted to be there. And now that luxury, that privilege has been taken away. And that took a long time to get used to. I've never felt that. Okay, there have been places I did not want to go to. There have been times where I have not wanted to travel, but it's been my choice, not something that is, there's just no airplanes in the airport, so you can't go anywhere. That's done it. That's a done deal. So that really took me a long time to move through. And I was surprised by that, because I thought that, look, I'll roll with this. It's no problem. Perhaps also the fact that I was chosen to be on a small island in the North Sea called the UK. Perhaps that added to the anxiety, spending time with folks that I haven't done for many, many years, probably compounded the anxiety furthermore. So that sudden and profound shift from being mobile and independent and that sense of freedom beneath your wings to suddenly being on the ground and not running and having to choose to find other benefits, and that's in care and family and communal small spaces rather than communal large spaces, have all provided their learnings. And I feel that if you're coming through COVID and you're feeling that it's oppressive and difficult, then I feel for you. I feel very much for you. There's a lot of suffering out there. But at the same time, maybe some of that sense of oppression is about your perspective and your choices, and they don't have to be as restrictive. And mine were, and it took time to be able to let them go. We talk about letting go a great deal. Learning to let go is something you never stop learning.
I think that's so true. I think that's been one of the biggest things I've struggled with in this whole thing is like, what is that notion of letting go? What is surrender? And how do you deeply and still proactively controlling what we can, right? Still proactively saying, I'm going to get up and move and shake this, what's this feeling? But continue to embrace this and navigate with it. I think, of course, we're not lessening the blow of this, because there is a massive blow, but there is this upswing that is like unfolding, and and we've seen this in the planet getting a rest, of course, and but then also like you having to navigate into a world of being more settled for the first time of your life, and this will probably be the only time that you'll have to be so rooted, right? And what that means, and that's all like the unknown in your environment, right? And you're with family, as you said, you're with your dad and your mother, dad and mom.
So my parents separated when I was very young. So I spent 2 months with my mother, and now I'm spending time with my father. So it'll be 2 months and 2 months.
And so how has that experience been to, like, after you've had these incredible, this incredible life that like many can't even fathom or really relate with, as you've really hung tight to your bliss and your passion. And what is it like to come back to this culture that's also so much part of you, that's also, your roots and your heritage, and be able to really embrace this and look at your dad, as you said, and have these dinners with him and say, like, and have this moment of pause and really be able to look at this world that you haven't been able to engage with.
Oh, look, it's surreal. There are things about this place that I suddenly am confronted with deep familiarity, and There is much of it that is a complete mystery, and there are some things that you just, no matter how hard you might have tried or would try, you can never, ever change. So one of the things that I've always found an interesting discussion with people over the years has been the nature versus nurture argument about who we are and what we are. And I think one of the intriguing things about travel is that you get to explore some of that. Perhaps you kid yourself that it's nature or nurture as it goes along. I can't explain my nomad inclinations and whether they're nature or nurture. But coming back here after so long, I am confronted with some things that I would have normally dismissed as being irrelevant or a trifle, and suddenly they're actually really quite important. I do like English beer. I don't drink it very often. It's very rare, but I'm quite happy to drink it. It's one of those things that just, I have it in my head. It might taste terrible, I don't know, but I've convinced myself for a long time that I like it, so I like it. I can walk along with my father, and people will say, I can't tell you apart when you're walking next to each other. You walk exactly the same. But it's a strange connection and disconnection at the same time. It's very hard to explain, and I'm sure that I could probably spend the rest of my life trying to work it out and not find an answer. Internally, the time to be able to spend with family has just been a joy beyond joys. I had never expected to feel such a deep sense of belonging and of self and of just oneness.
What are your future plans? Like, what do you hope to see with the GHT?
Well, the first thing we'll try to do is a survey of women within remote mountain communities, ostensibly about two things. One, their relationship with tourism, and one, their practices regarding menstruation. Because the women are they're permanent residents in most of the communities. The men are the ones that flip in and out to go off and work. So the women are there. They're the custodians of traditions and culture within a community. So they're the ones that are deciding about festivals and, indigenous dress. They're making the clothes themselves frequently. But a lot of their behaviors and protocols are restricted because of menstruation. So every girl in the Himalaya, although a lot of girls go to school, they miss 25% of their education. And when they're at home, the women can't interact with visitors to the home or guests to the home because of menstruation. So somebody else has to do it. And that means that you have all sorts of issues. So we want to try and bring these two issues together to affect some capacity change within the communities by empowering women to assert their natural right to behave as women as they choose all of the time, whether they're menstruating or not. Because that then gives us greater community capacity to be able to introduce tourism to those communities. At the moment, they're flat out busy planting fields, growing crops, growing children, looking after aged parents, everything else. They don't really have the time and the capacity to be able to also then handle a bunch of tourists on their doorstep. So let's hope that we can get them to really accept that being a modern woman is something that's going to be able to provide them with modern opportunity of integrating with tourism. As part of that, I want to be able to sort of make them the owners of the Great Himalaya Trail within their community. So we get the communities together, maybe that's a valley or a national park area, get all the communities together, and all of the community groups, and there are mothers groups within all of those communities, create a not-for-profit business which would own the intellectual capital of the Great Himalaya Trail within their communities. The bookings will come through the website and through the app to that not-for-profit, and after they have dispersed incomes, whatever residual profit there is will then be shared with all of the communities, whether they are looking after the tourists or not. So it benefits the whole region.
Oh my God, that's so fascinating. So I know that's something that I would never even think of. Why is menstruation such a? I mean, what do they do over there for that? Why is that such a bigger issue
It's a
there?
social taboo. Basically, a woman while she's menstruating isn't allowed to talk to or touch anyone else. She's not allowed in her home. She has to sleep outside, normally in the cowshed, um, and remain isolated unless she has children under the age of 5 who sleep with her. So that in itself introduces a lot of health issues, a lot of problems within communities. And what we want to try and do is solve some of those, but in a very constructive, positive framework.
And why is that taboo in the culture?
That taboo existed everywhere. It's just that in the Western world, we haven't had it for quite a while. But you don't have to go back very far in history to see that women, when they were menstruating, were really not welcome around the home very often. In Hinduism, especially, it's a big issue. Nepal is 85% Hindu. So the impure nature of the female form during menstruation is a big problem. In some more radical, more traditional, whatever word, fundamental Hindu communities, at the end of the menstruation period, a woman then has to drink cow urine to purify herself. It's pretty out there.
That's crazy. I can't believe that there's still this connotation of um, menstruation. I know I've heard from like an energetic or from a spiritual standpoint of like the menstruation is a time of needing to be isolated because it's like it's a way to be in tune. Is that a factor at all, or is it just this taboo? Is it?
It's blood.
Okay. So, wow.
And
And so
male patriarchal dominant systems.
wow. So they're literally isolated and like pushed away the whole time and then welcomed back. So it's a very shameful process.
Yeah, so which is why the Dignity Without Danger is a big program in Nepal at the moment. It's all about menstruation.
That's amazing. So it's interesting to me the larger effect that happens on tourism, in that like there's this big break in especially the economy and how everything the smallest ripple has a bigger effect, of course, and like them being pulled out of schools, them being then having to being that pulled away from society, not being able to contribute during that time.
And that's what holistic thinking should be. People say the word holistic and they think, oh, it's just big picture tourism. No, it's not. Tourism is a tiny little part of the big picture. So if you're truly going to be holistic, then you have to think about agriculture, you have to think about health, education, IT, power. Where are they going to get electricity from? How are they going to maintain that electricity? So the women are the ones that we want to be teaching to be simple engineers that can fix power lines, because 93% of micro hydro projects in the Himalaya are currently non-functional because of a basic engineering problem.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And
but you get the development people, they look at one thing, they don't look at anything else. And it's all silo thinking. It's just, and then cookie cutter approaches to everything. Oh God, it drives me mad.
I think that's what's so magical about like transformational travel and this more intentional travel group that I get to peek in the, just in the curtains to, is that you guys are capturing this larger picture and saying, tourism is not just, it's not just about getting people out there. It's also, there's all this bigger picture that we seem to be missing with travel.
Yeah, completely. And I think that that's true everywhere. Everywhere. It doesn't make any difference if it's Nepal, it's everywhere. It just doesn't. a few people get it, a few people see it. Very few people, if anyone right now, can actually affect any major change beyond travel, beyond their own immediate sphere of influence, which is why I say with the GHT, I want to turn it on its head. The whole arrogance of the travel industry in its own self-importance just it drives me mad sometimes. Travel companies, businesses, organizations, travelers all need to understand what humility really means, because they wouldn't be able to go anywhere and do anything without the good grace of the communities that host them.
What do you think humble means? What does humble mean to
Strong
you?
enough to say you don't know.
And so in action, what is that? What would you like to see?
Ask for help. I could never have done a GHT without a great deal of help and assistance from the communities, from the people who live with virtually nothing. And they open their homes, they open their hearts, they open their dinners to me and my translator or whoever was with me. Extraordinary generosity and welcoming nature, helpful, and also the mountains. You know, the spirits of the mountains were very much there for me and very, you know, benign and caring when they could have been very harsh and unpleasant. So yeah, I'm very happy to accept help. I'm very happy to ask for help. It's also a really fantastic way of starting a conversation.
I also want to hear from you about the sustainable factor of all this.
Well, you're going to open a can of worms with me and sustainability. I wrote a paper in January on the paradox of sustainability, especially within travel. I think that sustainability in principle and the original principles are fantastic ideals, and really, if they had been articulated and pursued in the way that was intended, they could have really created a lot of change for the positive. But the problem was that it was very dry, and I'm very, although I work in a lot of development stuff, I'm very averse to development speak, and I don't like this quasi-academic approach to being able to invent words and try and make things sound more complicated than they actually are, especially when you're talking to local communities who couldn't really care less about development speak, and what they want to do is, you know, be told, if I can do it like this or do it like that, which way do you think is going to be better, you know, for whatever reasons. So keep it simple, avoid the nonsense. And I think that sustainability got sucked in very much to the development agenda of making it too complicated with the words, the vernacular, and the jargon. So I'm on a mission to try and change that. And during that mission, I've come across some really wonderful, inspiring people that have challenged a lot of my own preconceptions about sustainability and the application of sustainability, both in the field, people doing stuff, and also people working perhaps from a more theoretical framework, dealing with destination management and business management systems. So anyway, this paradox of sustainability, I actually have spent a lot of time trying to teach sustainability to small business owners in Asia, and most of it just goes straight over their head. Not because it's incomprehensible, but simply the language isn't you know, clicking the switches. It isn't turning them on. It isn't grabbing their attention. And so out of all of this, and by expanding the concepts of sustainability, this idea of regenerative enterprises really has struck a chord in me. Regeneration is something that I think is very human. People breed, they create new generations. People kind of get that. It's kind of a basic human instinct. And so the idea of regeneration is a much easier concept for people to be able to relate to, and then start trying to apply it to their business and to their activities. And instead of talking about businesses, they're actually enterprises. Enterprises are more inclusive. They reach out to more people. They're part of a network. And if you're American or English and you were brought up with Star Trek, it means a spaceship. But still, yeah, it has a lot more meaning, and the meanings are good. Business is becoming a bit of a bad word, a bit of a negative word, and I think we want to try and get a language that allows people to move into a more positive space in talking about what they're doing. So regenerative enterprises kind of gets me going, and the sustainability machine is underneath it. That's the foundation, and how you actually then incorporate community-based tourism ideas. Landscape aesthetics is a fantastic approach to thinking about our symbiotic relationship with the land that we live from, on, with, and the animal kingdom that surrounds us. So being able to bring those different elements together and really start thinking holistically about tourism. And I don't think that's happened. It has in small pockets, but mass tourism that's the main majority of the impact that we're dealing with here. Well, mass tourism's currently in the shed for the next little while, and the people that are able to make a difference and able to thrive in this period are the ones who aren't mass tourism. They are the regenerative enterprises. They are the people that are going to be able to affect change and be inclusive and do things in a more holistic way. Hurrah! The COVID is actually a release. It's a breath of air for these people that have been, I'm sure, feeling like they're battling against a world of indecision and indiscretion and abuse, and that's gone away for a little while, thank God. So I think that the regenerative system, sustainability, it's very much on the agenda. I'd love it to be very much part of the new agenda that all businesses are thinking of. It looks like that's beginning to happen. Let's just hope we can get a little bit more momentum behind it, a little bit more weight into what's going on, and let's see if it does happen.
I love what you say about acknowledging that, like, a lot of sustainability talk does go over people's head, and it doesn't quite click with them. And then what you're saying about changing the language to regenerative and holistic and all this other stuff, that sounds completely on board with what we should be doing. I also want to acknowledge the fact that, like, business, why has business become a dirty word? I don't understand that, because business is what feeds our families. Business is what keeps roofs over our heads. And so how do we make that more of a complementary, copacetic relationship between, in a way that, like, business can be good, business can be helping the planet, business can be helping humanity.
But too many businesses are selfish. And just like selfish people, they don't have friends. So I've come across a lot of different businesses working in tourism, and the majority of them don't trust each other. And it's the business owners, it's also the culture of the business to keep the information within and to make any assets in knowledge proprietary, to not share, to not go out and try and uplift the industry through collaboration. These things happen in little pockets here and there. They are not the way the majority of the business world works. If it was, we'd have seen an organization like TUI try to help Thomas Cook from going bankrupt and a lot of people losing their jobs. Of course, TUI are not going to help Thomas Cook. They're competitors. And this sense of competition is a very artificial sense of competition, because how on earth can you compete with somebody that's using and sharing the same resources as yourself? It's crazy. Just doesn't make sense. So businesses have got stuck in this, okay, we could go into a whole criticism of liberal capitalistic ideals about how a business and why a business should exist and all that kind of stuff. Let's just let go of all of that. Let's just think sensibly for a moment about the community that we live in, how as human beings we're used to living, and we are used to working within communities, villages and towns where we know our neighbors and where we do purchase products from people that we know, and they purchase products from us, and we share each other's lives, and we know stuff about each other, and something was going to happen, then, wow, we would help each other out. It's just immediately gone out of my head. The wonderful black and white movie about Christmas, A Perfect Life or something like this, I was for many, many years the most amazing movie ever created by Hollywood, because it was the whole community coming along and helping this guy and saving his butt when he thought he was all on his own. This idea has been around a long while. This is not a surprise that it's only recently that we've seen businesses become considered these isolated, selfish organizations that are not putting the collective interest, or the interest of the society that they exist in first. They've put their shareholders first. The shareholders that do nothing, sit at home, got pension funds that invest in these things, and essentially they don't participate in the business at all. So I can understand that there is now a big disconnect between why our idea of the positive nature of a business has gradually broken apart and fragmented. And yes, we could try and rebuild that. We could try and get the word business to mean something positive again. But I fear that there are too many businesses that are fragmented and are never going to be reunited with their social causes. As much as CSR and as much as all of the ideals of triple bottom line accounting and everything else has come up with over the years, essentially most businesses exist to make profit for the owners and the shareholders and nothing else. So
there are those good businesses, though, and we do have to acknowledge that there are businesses that especially during these last 20 years, that have really turned their attention to social change. How do we bring more of, like, as you're saying, make more where sustainability is more, I guess, sexy, and more where these companies, there's not such a wedge between like it's either this or that, right? Because essentially these have to work together. And so
if you leave a bottle of milk for long enough, the cream goes to the top. And in many ways, I see that regenerative enterprises are the cream at the top, and the general business world is the milk. Well, you can let it sit still, and you will get that differentiation and separation between the regenerative enterprises that are really trying to do the right thing and the rest of the world. You don't really want that. What you want to do is come along, pick up the bottle of milk and give it a good shake and homogenize, combine it all together, and have the guys that are doing the really good stuff actually trying to seed and feed, nurture the same practices in the general business community. And the people who will make that choice happen, the people who will actually help feed and help nurture that transition towards regenerative enterprises, are the customers. They're the ones that get to make the choice. And COVID has actually been a benefit from that, because it's isolated people and reminded them of what's important: family, community, home. These are things that are deeply embedded in our psyches as our physical and mental comfort zones. Well, if you're going to be a successful travel company, you're going to be able to feed and nurture and maintain that sense of quiet within. You don't want concerned, worried clients. You want them to be feeling safe and secure and healthy. And regenerative enterprises already have that goal as part of their core function. The commercial businesses don't. So I'm sure that what we will see is that the people that are already in that regenerative space are going to find it much easier to come back into operation more quickly, and will find more success, because people are going to go home and rave about them, as opposed to going off on a mass tourism project and coming home and saying, oh my God, I can't believe, if you'd have seen, oh wow, I am shocked. I never thought it was going to be like that. Well, mass tourism's got a big problem. So I think that the change in language is very much a sign of the times. I think that needs to come with it. I don't think that going back to a previous language is likely to affect more change. I think it's likely to take people back into an old paradigm, and we don't really want them to be doing that. So as much as I personally don't think the word business is particularly bad, there are apparently, and it seems to be, a lot of bad businesses making the word bad. So I think we just have to accept it and say, okay, let's try and embark upon a new journey with a new tool set and a new vocabulary.